Good evening and welcome to St. Louis Community College at Florissant Valley. My name is Erin Minion. I am an assistant professor of history and chair of the campus's Martin Luther King Celebration Event Committee. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our 2024 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. Now is the time. Thank you all for taking the time to gather with us this evening. While weather forced us to postpone our celebration, it is never the wrong time to reflect on Dr. King's work or to hear from students in our community. Tonight, we will honor Dr. King's legacy and celebrate the incredible passion and talents of students from STLCC, students from our neighboring partner school districts, and members of our community. We hope that you will plan an active role in tonight's celebration. Please share your thoughts, impressions, and photos of tonight's event on the social media platform of your choice using the hashtag STLCC-FV MLK 2024. As a reminder, if you do take photos this evening, be sure that your flash is off so as to not disrupt our speakers. As part of our celebration each year, we ask that attendees contribute to our Archers Market, a location where students can access food and other basic necessities. While supporting the Archers Market, you are not only providing someone with some of the basic necessities to get them through their week, you're also helping to lower a barrier to his or her success as a student. If you are interested in donating to the Archers Market, please call 314-513-4534. A little more than 60 years ago, Dr. King gave one of the most important speeches in American history. This year, we asked students, faculty, and staff to help us begin tonight's celebration by reflecting on Dr. King's words. So please join me in turning your attention to the screen as members of the STLCC community deliver selected portions of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech.
We have come to this hollow spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now.
Now is the time to make real promises of democracy.
Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation
to the sunlit path of racial justice.
Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood.
Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
Let us not wallow in the valleys of despair. I'll say to you today, my friends.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream.
It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will one day sit down together at the table of brotherhood.
I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where
they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
I have a dream today.
I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands
with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers.
I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low.
The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
This is our hope. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope.
With this faith, we will
be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood.
This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring.
And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire.
Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York.
Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania.
Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado.
Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California.
But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia.
Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee.
Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi.
From every mountainside, let freedom ring.
Free at last.
Free at last.
Thank God Almighty.
We are free at last.
I have to say, having watched nearly all the speakers, it was incredibly inspiring to see students, faculty, and staff of all ages and from so many different backgrounds deliver this speech. Each person had their own favorite section and emphasized words a little differently. I could have spent days watching the different performances. Thank you to everyone who lent their voices and their spirit to this project. We also welcome you all to participate in tonight's celebration through your artistic talents. We have coloring sheets designed by Zach Babbitt, Amy Dominguez, and Kalea Forrester. Zach, Amy, and Kalea are students in Ella Duker's Computer Art Studio course here at STLCC Florissant Valley. The students were tasked with creating coloring sheets inspired by Dr. King's activism. We invite you to take the sheets and crayon packs home with you as a way to continue reflecting on Dr. King's work after the celebration has ended. Now, it gives me great pride to introduce to you our student MC for the evening, Grace Ford. Grace is a sophomore at STLCC Florissant Valley and also a dual enrollment student at Hazelwood East High School. After graduating from both STLCC and Hazelwood East, she plans to continue her education in aeronautics with a concentration in flight science. Please join me in welcoming Grace Ford to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to commemorate Dr. King's birthday. Tonight's celebration is in partnership with North County Churches Uniting for Racial Harmony and Justice. Celebrations such as ours must not only honor Dr. King, but also shine a light on the work of service, justice, and humanity that he has inspired. As mentioned, this year's theme is Now is the Time. Dr. King was passionate about building a community, and he knew that there was no better time than the present. By using messages rooted in love and humanity, he moved so many to come together and to create a world better for everyone. To this day, his words are encouragement, reminding us all that a peaceful, just, and inclusive world can only happen if it becomes everyone's mission to create one. And now is always the time for that work to be done. Tonight, you will hear from different speakers share what this message means to them and how Dr. King's tireless effort to inspire all of us to work together continues to have an impact on us today. I believe after we hear these passionate speeches, we will feel more empowered and inspired to continue Dr. King's work. It is my pleasure to now welcome to the stage Elena Elps, vocalist from the University of St. Louis, who will be performing Lift Every Voice and Sing. And she will be accompanied by Dr. Paul Higdon, Professor of Music.
So, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, it's a tradition when I see Elena Epps once a year, about 1 hour prior to now, for our rehearsal, I ask, what have you been up to? And she always answers with something rather extraordinary, but this year she knocked it out of the park. She has recently, since the publication of your program, she has become a graduate fellow and young artist manager of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra.
Please rise for Lift Every Voice and Sing. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our wearies, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee, shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
Thank you, Elena and Dr. Higdon, for your beautiful talents. In addition to having a Flow Valley student serve as the MC for this event, we also highlight our exceptional students through speeches on our theme. Our first student speaker for the evening is Ariana Kimbrough.
Hello and thank you to everyone that's here to celebrate this day. I wanted to first say that I'm happy to be here, paying my respects to and showing my appreciation for the man we're celebrating. Because while we honor him today, we feel what he and other civil rights activists achieved all year round. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fought for a change that he knew was worth it even when it put his life in danger. So even when it's scary, we can all try to remember that as long as we're there for each other, we can continue fighting for equality and equity in every aspect of our lives. Even if you don't think there's anything you can do, there are still little things that matter every day. In our communities, even just talking to someone or showing your active support can make someone's day and help people know that you're there for them. After all, we learned from MLK Jr. that we should fight for health, safety, and the rights of each other. By communicating with people, by connecting with each other, and by learning to understand what others are going through and exchanging information, we already begin to inspire a change. Of the current important issues we face, that could help with the lack of truth and knowledge and education about ourselves. As of now, we live in a time in which some people are trying their best to silence the truth and limit access to ideas. So we must continue to talk, share, and fight back. Now is the time to fight back against the attempt to take books out of schools and those who would like to see Black history removed from schools. We need to remind everyone that we shouldn't be afraid to confront the real American history and learn from it. So much information about Black history still gets swept under the rug, and as a result, so many of us still lack knowledge about the past and present affairs. Black people still suffer from being seen through a shallow lens of stereotypes as opposed to as individuals. Additionally, it's just as important that we acknowledge and help other stereotyped and disenfranchised communities too, because if other communities are suffering, so are we. If one of us isn't seen as equal, none of us are. So get involved in your community. Try having more conversations. Talk to people and see what they think. See if there's anything you can do to help your community thrive and grow. See if there's anything that our actions can do to ripple throughout our communities, just as Dr. MLK's did. One of our most powerful tools is our voice, communication. So again, now we can deepen interpersonal connections with each other, treat each other with empathy and with care. Now is the time that we start having deeper conversations with each other and ourselves to truly understand what we and others are going through. Never be afraid to love one another and support one another, because deep down, some of the strongest changes are made when people reach out to each other and are not afraid to listen and be heard. Now is the time to take steps in figuring out who you are, what you want to do, and who you want to be, because it's never too late. We each have a voice of our own and a life of our own that, if carefully nurtured, can be a start to you living your life the way you feel the most proud of, to being able to help those you love, and even people you don't know, to inspire yourself and others around you to do the same, to start changes of their own and help this world improve. Dr. MLK didn't do what he did on his own. He was inspirational, powerful, and he could move whole communities. But it took those communities and as many people as possible in them to really fight for the changes they needed and deserved. So remember every day that nothing is too small in action. Every day we inspire someone. And as you do, continue moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariana. We have one more student speaker from here at Flow Valley. Please join me in welcoming Bailey Smith to the stage.
Good evening. For my speech in correspondence with this year's theme, Now is the Time, the quote, "If not now, when?" comes to my mind. Martin Luther King Jr. expressed to his followers that right now is the time for change. When talking about Black history, or even African Americans at all, I've noticed that Martin Luther King Jr. is the person who's talked about the most. Is it because of his peaceful protests, his articulated speeches, his PhD, his Nobel Peace Prize? Do you notice a pattern? We all know that Martin Luther King was renowned for his serenity and hopeful optimism. But what about after the Civil Rights Act was passed? In the last 2 years of his life, Dr. King had felt that his I Have a Dream speech had become a nightmare. While acknowledging that segregation was a heinous way to divide a nation by race, Dr. King also acknowledged the truth of there being another America. He addressed this continuing problem of inequality in America as the Vietnam War raged abroad and contributed to the discord back home. This is an excerpt from his speech titled The Other America, 1967. I would like to use the war as a subject for which to speak this afternoon, the other America. And I use this subject because there are literally two Americas. One America is beautiful for our situation, and, in a sense, this America is overflowing with the miracle of prosperity and the honey of opportunity. This America is the habitat of millions of people who have food and material necessities for their bodies, and culture and education for their minds, and freedom and human dignities for their spirits. In this America, millions of people experience every day the opportunity of having life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in all of their dimensions. And in this America, millions of young people grow up in the sunlight of opportunity. But tragically and unfortunately, there is another America. In this America, millions of work-starved men walk the streets daily in search for jobs that do not exist. In this America, millions of people find themselves living in rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. In this America, people are poor by the millions, and they find themselves perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. In a sense, the greatest tragedy of this other America is what it does to other children. Little children in this America are forced to grow up with clouds of inferiority forming every day in their little mental skies. And as we look at this other America, we see it as an arena of blasted hopes and shattered dreams. Although Dr. King's strategy of peaceful nonviolence and focus on love and peace contributed to the new Civil Rights Acts and expanded opportunities for African Americans, he recognized that there was a continuing disparity. As we celebrate Dr. King's legacy today, we have to remember that while he is a figure of racial justice, he was also not one-dimensional. Dr. King acknowledged that there was still a lot of work to be done in the world of racism and discrimination in our country, and the phrase, "now is the time for me," means we have to start acknowledging that there is more work to be done. At what age do we start teaching children that people suffer to this day with the same problems that Dr. Martin Luther King was trying to address? At what point in time do we recognize that schools trying to ban critical race theory are covering up exactly what he was fighting against? At what age in the future of this country do we wake up and realize that we need to do something to stop repeating history? I say now's the time. Thank you.
As most of us are familiar with, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. played a huge role in American history. So much so that sometimes it may be difficult to address all of his accomplishments properly. But we can agree that he left an important national legacy. Most commonly, when we looked at Dr. King's life, the typical focus is on his contributions to the civil rights movement and how he worked to advance African Americans socially and economically. These great things should be studied, honored, and given the respect they deserve. Considering tonight's theme, now is the time, I would like to offer a different perspective. If we take a surface level look at Dr. King's life, we know that he led a campaign for racial justice, a nonviolent one at that. Considering the troubling times, King faced many tribulations, including obstacles, threats, physical violence, and even an assassination attempt. To rise above such hardships, King had to be courageous, driven, motivated, fair, and even patient. I would like to emphasize the importance of having these character traits and applying them to our lives. Celebrating Dr. King's birthday and legacy is the perfect time to do so. Let's just take one trait, patience, for example, and take a deeper dive into what it means and why it is such an important attribute. Let's see what the Bible has to say about patience, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would have certainly have done. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 29 says, "Whoever is slow to anger has a great understanding, but he who has a hasty temper exalts folly." Let's also take a look at Proverbs chapter 15, verse 18, which reads, "A hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel." These verses both correlate with Dr. King's story, time, and even the strategy he used to fight for equality. I believe patience is essential, and now is the time and a perfect opportunity to take these concepts and exercise them in our lives. We all aren't perfect by any means, and there was only one perfect person who inhabited this earth that I'm aware of, and he was fully man and fully God. Taking this into consideration, it is a new year, and as cliche as it sounds, we should just strive to be better. Not a new year, new us, more like a new year, better us. One of the ways of achieving that is by taking advantage of days like these to honor and celebrate a monumental and historical figure like MLK himself, and digging deep to unveil attributes within ourselves. We can start by being patient with ourselves, others, opportunities, and anything we want in life. Then again, patience was just one quality King mastered. And I find that if we take time to pay homage and to analyze and critically think, we discover that there are ways to keep such a genuine spirit like his alive and working in our homes, relationships, communities, so that the love Dr. King wanted for his nation is continuously being spread and marinated into our lives. Thank you.
After hearing their words, I do not know that I've ever been prouder to be an Archer. Now, please allow me to introduce our Florissant Valley Campus President and Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Elizabeth Gazel Perkins.
Good evening, and thank you, Grace, for the introduction. Tonight marks my 8th Dr. King celebration with the college, and each year I continue to be so impressed by the remarkable talents of our students and those in our community who share their stories with us tonight. I also continue to be humbled by the work done in our community by our leaders, our nonprofits, businesses, and other impactful individuals, and that is part of what we are here to celebrate this evening. As Dr. King famously said, everyone can be great because anyone can serve. Yet we know that some people have a spirit that calls them to extraordinary service, and they do so not for recognition or awards, but because they wish to make their communities better. These heroes of our community know now is the time. At Florissant Valley, we are grateful and fortunate to have so many wonderful partners who answer the call to serve our students and our community. And tonight, it is our pleasure to honor one of them with our Dr. Rance Thomas Excellence in Community Partnership Award. Dr. Thomas is the namesake for this award because of his never-ending partnership with and advocacy for St. Louis Community College and the community. His work extended to supporting events at chambers, hospitals, churches, schools, and community groups. He was easily one of the most active members of North County and worked tirelessly to make this community a better place for all. In the spirit of Dr. King, Dr. Thomas specifically worked toward facilitating unity, racial justice, and harmony across St. Louis and beyond. Beyond all of these things, Dr. Thomas was easily one of the kindest and most genuine people I have ever met. He was a very dear friend to me and to so many. He was a cornerstone of this event every single year, and the pride he felt for our NCCU winners filled our theater and would have definitely filled not just this room, but the entire Student Center. The Dr. Rance Thomas Excellence in Community Partnership Award is the highest honor provided by the Florissant Valley campus to an external partner. The award itself is meant to symbolize the ways in which our college and tonight's recipient work together by connecting and intertwining two distinct pieces into one beautiful sculpture. This is our 7th year of presenting this award, with other previous recipients, the Ferguson-Florissant School District, Rittner School District, Normandy Schools Collaborative, Christian Hospital, and Emerson Electric being just as deserving as Dr. Thomas. Fortunately for us, it was just as easy to select our 2024 recipient, St. Louis County Justice Services. Almost exactly 1 year ago, STLCC and St. Louis County Justice Services launched the PACE program, Progress Attained Through College Education. The program provides residents an opportunity to earn college credit to begin creating a better future for themselves once they have exited the judicial system, and even while they're in the judicial system. The first year of the program has been an incredible success. Students have not only completed their academic coursework, but they have truly excelled. We have more than 50 students participate and 20 courses offered. Some of our who teach in that program are right here in this room. If you've taught in that program before, give a wave so we can thank you. You can wave higher, LaRonda. We love you. Thank you for your work. The students in our first year earned 529 credit hours with an overall combined GPA of 3.49. Additionally, a remarkable 15 students from this program earn eligibility in the Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society. Of course, nobody can provide a better perspective on this program's impact than one of our very first students. This student wrote, "I have received more support and encouragement here than I ever have in my entire life, and never dreamed I would ever get into college and become successful." The student added, "I am very excited to become a true asset to my family, my church, and to society. This is a huge thank you to the ones who made this possible and believe in me. I am worth the chance, and God knows my heart is pure." And I'm so proud that the person who's here to accept the award tonight on behalf of St. Louis County Justice Services is the program's biggest champion, the woman who puts all of her heart and soul behind these students, behind the program, behind me, right? She trusts me to come in and do things. She trusts our faculty, and she makes it all happen. So please give it up thunderously for Missy Lichtig for St. Louis County Justice Services. I'll hold it while you talk, because it's real heavy.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. And thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is an extraordinary honor. I have so much to tell you about all of our students because, yes, I am their biggest support. I am their biggest fan, and this is truly my passion. But it is with, I wrote a speech. It is with immense joy and gratitude that I stand before you to accept this Dr. Rance Thomas Excellent in Community Partnership Award on behalf of St. Louis County Justice Services. But first and foremost, I would like to express our deepest appreciation to the Dr. Martin Luther King Celebration Committee and St. Louis Community College for selecting us as this year's recipient. This is to be recognized in the footsteps of the esteemed Dr. Rance Thomas, and to join the ranks of the previous awardees is a testament to the dedication and hard work of every member of our PACE team. Our partnership with St. Louis Community College has been one of great significance for us. I firmly believe that collaboration is the cornerstone of positive change, and I am humbled that we are receiving an award that values the importance of working together towards creating equity and fostering opportunities for students to flourish. The legacy of Dr. Rance Thomas, who served as a leader in the North St. Louis County community, is an inspiration to us all. We are committed to upholding the principles he stood for and to contributing to the betterment of our community in his spirit. To the committee and to the entire St. Louis Community College team, our Justice Services extends our deepest gratitude for this recognition. It is a privilege to be a part of the Florissant Valley Dr. King Celebration. This is not just an event. It is a celebration of unity, equality, and the enduring spirit of community. We are grateful to be part of such a wonderful celebration. I also want to express my sincere gratitude to every member of the PACE program, every single member, including our students. This award is a reflection of your dedication, your hard work, and your commitment to our community. It's a shared achievement, and I am honored to stand here on your behalf. Once again, thank you for this incredible honor. We are inspired and motivated to continue our journey of service and partnership, working towards a community where everyone has an opportunity to thrive. Thank you.
Two hands.
Two hands. It's beautiful. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dr. Perkins, and congratulations again to St. Louis County Justice Services. I would now like to welcome Howard Hayes to the stage. Mr. Hayes sits on the Board of Directors of North County Churches Uniting for Racial Harmony and Justice. Mr. Hayes will be introducing the winners of the NCCU's Dr. Martin Luther King Oratory Contest.
Good evening, everyone. I am so humbled by the group of young people talking to us about our past and our future. For our young leader speakers, could we give them another round of a hand? With you, our future is in good hands. Thank you so much. So, I am Howard Hayes. I am a member of the Board of North County Churches Uniting for Racial Harmony and Justice, known as NCCU. But first, we have been, as an organization, co-sponsoring this event with St. Louis Community College for over 15 years. But as we did last year, I want to do again this year. Thank the President, Dr. Perkins, and her amazing team for partnering with us again on this amazing effort to recognize the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So, to Dr. Perkins and her staff, one more round of applause, please. Unfortunately, our acting president, Dr. Barbara Thomas, could not be with us this evening. So at this time, I will provide a brief history of NCCU. But you know, it's a saying, keep living and great things will happen. I never dreamed in a million years that I would be on the same program with Reverend Gray. Thank you, Reverend Gray, for your commitment to all of us, African Americans and all Americans, period, across this country. Thank you very much. So before I begin my remarks, as you know, Dr. King was a Baptist preacher. And so if he wanted to get wind up in a sermon, he could easily do it. But if you looked at the archives of his interviews, when he met with his fellow members in the civil rights movement, he was a man of calm and peace. But as you know, his words move mountains. And so I would like for each of you to turn to the one sitting next to you and calmly say, "Now is the time." Thank you. So, on to our history. In the 1990s, there was a huge influx of individuals into St. Louis County from St. Louis City. As a result, a large number of longtime residents were fleeing to St. Charles and beyond out of fear and uncertainty regarding the unknown. Dr. Rance Thomas and others formed a dismantling racism committee, of which Dr. Thomas was chair, and attempted to deal with this situation and to attract African Americans to John Knox Church. They met for about 18 months, but didn't have much success in either case. In fact, some of the dismantling racism committee members also fled. At that time, John Knox Presbyterian Church had less than 1% of African Americans in their church and were concerned about this also. Therefore, the former co-pastor of John Knox, Reverend Al Kronermacher, and Dr. Thomas invited other churches in North County to meet at John Knox to discuss the situation and learn more about what they could do to stop or slow down the loss of members. Other churches were experiencing the same problem. As a matter of fact, all North County churches wanted to do something about this situation. Dr. Thomas led the meeting as chair of the church's Dismantling Racism Committee, and 19 churches, the founding churches, participated. They met for 3.5 hours. The group decided that they had to do something about the situation. Therefore, they met again and eventually formed the organization called North County Churches United for Racial Harmony and Justice, NCCU, to promote racial understanding and social justice. That was in 1998. They began with a covenant to bind them together as a community of believers to work together on this situation. The basic principle was, and still is, if God loves each person unconditionally, how can we not do the same? Over 30 churches have signed the covenant, committing them and their members to work together to promote racial understanding and social justice. Currently, 25 churches are members because some have closed and others have merged with other churches. NCCU began with holding public forums on race relations in a county park with 150 people attending. Then NCCU held meetings at St. Louis Community College, at Florissant Valley, the former Jamestown Mall, University of Missouri at St. Louis, and churches throughout the region. We had leaders from school districts, police departments, mayors, real estate agencies, hospitals, and of course, our church members. The NCCU's goal was and still is to bring all people together to help them to overcome some of the myths and misunderstandings they have of one another. NCCU has brought thousands of individuals together, and we have been told by some leaders in the community that we have helped reduce the exodus of residents from North County. NCCU continues to work with various organizations and agencies in North County, and one in particular in St. Louis called the St. Louis Equal Housing and Community Reinvestment Alliance. Our joint goal is to improve financial services for minorities and individuals in low and moderate income areas in St. Louis and St. Louis County. I will repeat that, St. Louis and St. Louis County. Our challenges have a destiny that are unified. Also, NCCU has formal written agreements with about 10 financial institutions. Before COVID, NCCU sponsored an annual awards program for outstanding individuals and organizations who have made a difference in race relations and social justice. Some of the awardees are Michael McMillan, President, CEO of the St. Louis Metropolitan Urban League, former Chancellor Thomas George of UMSL, and many other outstanding leaders in government, law enforcement, the church, and nonprofit communities. We have held a Youth Appreciation Award program as well, at which we recognize 15 to 20 outstanding students in North County schools for their achievements in education, citizenship, community service, artistic achievement, and athletic achievement. NCCU sponsors a computer academy during the summer, teaching students how to build a computer and use software. Upon completion of the training, students receive free computers. Since the Michael Brown shooting in Ferguson, NCCU has held public forums, conferences, prayer services, and meetings with police officials, city officials, clergy, and others participating. Although NCCU will call on area leaders at the highest levels, our mission is tied to the people of St. Louis County. For several years, NCCU has purchased $100 gift certificates and gives them to the Florissant Police Department to present to individuals they stop for minor offenses during the Christmas season. Instead of giving them tickets, they present them with $100 gift certificates and wish them their best as they go on their way. In 2023, NCCU provided 62 $100 cards to the police departments, and in 2022, we provided 65 $100 cards through the generosity of area churches and NCCU. The response the police receive is incredible. We expect next year to be even more impactful. NCCU has co-sponsored workshops, conferences, forums, and other events on race relations with St. Louis Community College at Florissant Valley. We have been working with the college for almost 20 years and have co-sponsored the Dr. King Celebration every year during that time. In connection with the celebration, NCCU organizes a Dr. King oratory contest on the life and work of Dr. King. The theme is the same as that at the college. At the contest, 5 winners are selected to present their essays during the celebration. They have been the highlight of the celebration and give us hope for our future. The winners have ranged in age from 8 to 80 years old. The Community Enrichment Commission of the City of Hazelwood also attends the contest and selects a 6th orator to present the city's Dr. Martin Luther King celebration. These are just some of the things we have done. I am pleased now to introduce the 5 orators this evening. Our first orator will be Miss Avery Davenport. Avery, please come to the podium.
Racial harmony and justice should exist within an ethnic culture, as well as among different ethnic cultures. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. states in his I Have a Dream speech, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. This statement is the essence of racial harmony and justice. While Dr. King delivered this speech from the perspective of the African American community, it speaks to racial harmony and justice for all. The lack of racial harmony and justice is evident within gun violence. Gun violence within the African American community is one of the most leading traumatizing experiences. Data provided by Everytown Support Fund in year 2023 indicates the following. 71% of Black adults or someone they know or care about has experienced gun violence in their lifetimes. 31% of Black people know or care about someone that was shot and wounded. 1 in 3 Black people know or care about someone who was killed with a gun. While these are statistics, unfortunately, I can relate. All 3 traumatizing experiences have happened to me within my 12 years of living. Now is the time for racial harmony and justice within the African American community to use our voices to resolve conflicts and not guns. When it comes to education in the community, if attending a more affluent district, you're exposed to better programming, classes, technology, higher qualified education, and teachers. In Missouri, the data provided by Ford through Ferguson recently stated Clayton spends $30,329 per student compared to Ferguson, which spends $13,441. This is approximately a $20,000 difference, which equates to 60% more funding to the Clayton School District. Ford through Ferguson further commented that, on average, majority white districts in St. Louis receive and spend more funding per student than majority Black districts. Majority Black districts receive, on average, a greater portion of their funding from state sources, 31% versus 14%, while majority white districts draw from local sources, 82% versus 58%. Missouri provides very little state funding for education, which leaves Texas to fill in the rest. As Ford through Ferguson states, state education funding is volatile because it is appropriated each year by politicians. Now is the time for politicians to enact legislation for equal funding to all schools so that each child can be exposed to a better education. As a 12-year-old, I have experienced the lack of racial harmony and justice. Because of these experiences, my parents continue to provide a strong foundation that inspires me to aspire beyond the current situation. I will use my voice to encourage my friends, classmates, and peers to talk to their disagreements with one another or visit the school counselor to resolve issues. I will uphold racial harmony and justice at my school by sharing funding ideas for our schools. Now is the time for racial harmony and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Avery. Now I'd like to call to the podium Evan Hines. Evan?
Good evening. Now is the time for racial harmony and justice. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. believed heavily in racial equality, as we all know. Sometimes I'm forced to wonder why. Are we still fighting for racial equality? And how do we achieve it to make this place we call home truly equal and harmonized? The problem of race is one that has been long studied within all industries. The reason why we study this is to compare and contrast. But comparing and contrasting is the exact reason why we don't have racial harmony. Racial harmony can only be achieved by joining together and understanding other races within our communities, rather than comparing ourselves to each other. In the past, white people were scared of black people. Some still are today. But it's not people they're scared of. It's what the black people could do, not only physically, but also intellectually. The strength of a black person's mind scared white people. The idea of a black person being better scared white people, especially white people who had power, and even more specifically, white people who had power over a black person. The evidence is in the history of our nation. For example, in Brown versus the Board of Education, the Brown family wanted to be able to send their child where they wanted rather than having her walk multiple miles to catch a bus every morning, just to get her education. Although the Supreme Court's decision was based on equality and sparsely touched on the idea of harmony that Dr. King aspired for, the Supreme Court ruled that the segregation of education forced the sense of inferiority and stunted personal growth for black students. Behind that front was the forcing of black teachers out of classrooms because white parents felt unsafe with black teachers. This caused the inability of black students to properly learn because of the lack of mentors and role models that looked like them. That decision alone has trapped black students in a lower category within the education system even today. That decision was a major part in a bigger plot to stop the progression towards racial harmony. To move towards racial justice, we must help the children of today so that tomorrow they will make and be great things together as one. Now is the time for racial harmony and justice. Now is the time for all men to truly be equal and united as one. Now is the time to take control of life and make racial equality the truth for the youth of this nation. Now is the time for racial harmony and justice. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Evan. Now I want to call to the podium Nyla Rayford. Nyla, please.
Good evening. Now is the time for racial harmony and justice. When I first read this quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, I struggled with what racial harmony I want to see happen. There are so many to choose from, and that's what stumped me. I have to have knowledge on this topic, something that I can have an in-depth discussion with others on. Then it came to me. I wish to speak to you all about a topic I've experienced: internalized racism within the Black community. I understand if my statement causes confusion. It might not make sense to you, and sometimes it doesn't make sense to me. The Black community is a tight-knit group. We support and stand up for each other, we stick together, and we never turn our backs on one another. Sadly, though, this isn't always the case. The issue is that we, as a community, allow stereotypes to tie us down and determine how we treat each other. One thing that Black people hate is being stereotyped, Yet we sometimes allow stereotypes to define our actions towards each other. We use stereotypes as guidelines and rules to determine who is and isn't Black. A discussion with my friends comes to mind. We were talking about music taste, and I made an offhand comment about not liking R&B. My reasoning being that I didn't prefer songs that talk about romantic relationships. The reactions I received were baffling to me. You're not Black, and you can't be Black if you don't like R&B. The same reaction happened when I said I didn't like watermelon. I don't have big lips. I'm not nappy-headed. I don't have incredibly dark skin, and yes, my father plays an active role in my life. This doesn't change the fact that I'm Black. Not acting or looking like the stereotypical Black person doesn't take away from my experience as one. I have yet to come across a Black person that fits the stereotypes. I won't lie and say that I've never taken such prejudiced actions based on internalized racism before, because I have. I prefer stores in other areas rather than my own neighborhood because I believe that the quality of service and care is better. My family prefers going out to Chesterfield and St. Charles when we go grocery shopping. It's not something that's done on purpose. This form of racism has been ingrained in our society for so long that it's a subconscious practice that most people participate in. I'm not here to shame anyone or place any blame. I know that this, just like with other things, will take time to fix. But as long as we are striving to fix it, it can be done. Now is the time to fix the way we think about ourselves and each other. Now is the time to get rid of internalized racism. Now is the time for us to heal. Now is the time for racial harmony and justice within the Black community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Nyla. As you can see, the excellence continues. Now we want to call, and names are important. And so, Danny, if I pronounce your last name, Strelay, incorrectly, please accept my apologies. But my heart is in this. Danny, please come to the podium.
Good evening. As World War II reached its conclusion, Charlie Parker composed the tune of the century, titled Now's the Time. This saxophonist derived his composition from the ongoing discrimination and oppression he faced. As the resurgence of racial violence from the integration of higher education arose, visual artist Jean-Michel Basquiat constructed the painting, Now's the Time, fabricating themes of inequality and injustice. Both mediums use the same phrase as famously stated in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. By doing so, these three individuals presented their emotions on social justice to the public and exposed their vulnerability. Dr. King is the exemplar of this expression. Many overlook the phrase, Now's the Time, from Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. We find it easy to center ourselves around abstract ideas because often they are more optimistic than the truth. Dr. King once said, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. He then proceeded to restate the words of the Declaration of Independence. Now, this wasn't his attempt at creating a happy idea for his audience to center themselves around. This was Dr. King's brave feat of demonstrating his vulnerability and concern towards an ongoing issue: racial inequality. Now is the time is a courageous statement because Dr. King's ideas are not abstract. The hopes for racial harmony and justice weren't too forward-thinking. They were goals ready to be brought to fruition. Listen to King's words. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation. Dr. King's ideas are not unrealistic dreams. They are not candied truths spoken for the sake of not upsetting his audience. Dr. King's words are an action being taken to create visible change for all citizens of the United States. These statements expose the necessity of change within our country. If we cannot demonstrate the vulnerability and courage like Dr. King, Charlie Parker, or Jean-Michel Basquiat once did, the United States cannot resolve its injustices. Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech resonated with Americans when racial harmony and justice were matters of question in our country. Courage was the characteristic necessary to effectively address these subjects during the civil rights movement. I Have a Dream was a catalyst for civil rights in 1963. While the speech remains relevant today, its influence has changed. We no longer require a catalyst, but courage. The unkept promises of the resolvement of social injustice can no longer stand. When Dr. King said now is the time, this was not a new thought. Dr. King was suggesting that now has always been the time. Now has always been the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now has always been the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation. Now has always been the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice. Now is the time for courage. Thank you.
Well, excellent work, Danny. Before I call our next speaker, Danny mentioned Jean-Michel Basquiat. Artist Basquiat died at 27 years old. He was a homeless African-American male that only painted for less than a decade. But his paintings now sell around the world for upwards of $100 million. So let no one bet against America. We have a long way to go as we move to a more perfect union, but it's the best place on the planet. Gregory Troop, please come up.
Good evening, everyone. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving. The time is now to address our African American educational system and its lagging nature of change to keep up with society. Why, do you ask? Well, The underdone answer might surprise you. The school system that serves African Americans is simply outdated. The staffing is limited, the funding for technological resources is limited, and the communal support is limited. Our society is now experiencing self-driving cars and artificial intelligence that can do almost anything for humans, while our classrooms have only changed in small increments over the past 20 years. The American educational system is not keeping up with the changes in the past 20 years. The students are the ones paying the price. Math and reading scores for 13-year-olds have hit their lowest scores in decades, according to usatoday.com in December of 2023. The education training programs have failed to prepare all stakeholders within the school system for a rapidly changing society. Is the educational system at fault when students' attention spans have decreased because of technology? This is why we have seen an increase of teenagers who are struggling with mental health problems while at school. Now is the time to ask, is the educational system responsible for a student's troubled home life? While the educational system may not be solely responsible for a student's troubled home life, are these systems put in place to support the whole child academically, socially, and emotionally, which will spill over into the student's home life? Now is the time to ask, is the educational system the cause of a family's socioeconomic standing? It is imperative that the community, including parents, students, and the school system, come together to help the whole child reach his or her full potential. One thing that is insane to me as an African-American student is that our ancestors died and were injured trying to obtain an education, and we just take it for granted. It's as if they fought and died for nothing, and our future leaders are currently scrolling through TikTok or Instagram without contributing anything positive to our society. This generation is the recipient of such advanced technology, but also lacks the skills needed to use the technology effectively. Technology can help us learn and grow, but no one wants to tap into these resources. Now is the time to address how the educational system is failing to keep up with the changes in its clientele. Now is the time to utilize the resources that technology provides us to meet students where they are in the journey of learning. Now is the time to encourage the tribal attitude that promotes students, parents, and educators working together to influence our future leaders. These strategies will help us achieve racial justice. If we embrace this model for change, then our ancestors, who didn't have a right to learn, but fought for this right, will be proud that we have picked up the torch and continued this movement. Thank you.
Again, our future is in competent, not just great, not just excellent, extremely competent. These young people wrote their own speeches, competent hands. Now, if I may, before we bring up our keynote speaker, I'd like to ask all of the members, the board members of NCU, join me quickly with our oratory winners. Here at this stand, we have certificates for them. So it'll take us about 5 minutes. NCU members, up, quick. It's, the president has spoken. It'll take 2 minutes.
Congratulations, and thank you to all our NCCU contest winners. Your words, your leadership, and your example challenge us to continue to do better. I am now honored to introduce our keynote speaker, Reverend Darryl Gray. Reverend Gray has committed himself to the civil and human rights movement in the United States and Canada for over 4 decades. Reverend Gray has served as senior staff to some of the most dedicated civil rights organizations and leaders across the country, including the NAACP, Rainbow Push Coalition, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, the late Representative John Lewis, the late Coretta Scott King, amongst others. Embodying our theme, Now is the Time, Reverend Gray currently serves as senior pastor of Greater Fairfax Missionary Baptist Church here in St. Louis. He is Director General for the Progressive National Baptist Convention, Incorporated, and chairperson of the St. Louis Detention Facilities Oversight Board. His extended biography can be found in your program. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Reverend Darryl Gray.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Grace. I sat there in awe after Avery and Evan and Nyla and Danny and Gregory. I asked myself, what more can be said? They have done an awesome job, and I would invite you to show them some more love. By the way, I'm going to be asking for ID. The 12-year-old, I'm going to be asking for ID. You are not 12 years old. No, seriously, I'll be asking for ID later on. To your president, Dr. Perkins, and to Dr. Hayes, and all who were involved in inviting me tonight, thank you very much. I am going to be mindful of the time that has been given to me. I understand I have 2 hours or something like that. I'll try to narrow that down. In all honesty, the young people that have come before me, impressive, awesome, inspiring, remarkable. When, as Dr. Hayes said, when we think about the future, if y'all stay involved, if we think about our future, if you stay involved, then our future is in good hands. Now, I want to make one correction. I didn't think about it until after I heard it, and it might tell my age, and it may not. My activism is more like 55 years. It said 40 years, and that was my secretary's fault, but it's more like 55 years of activism. I started out in activism in college, in Spartanburg, South Carolina, at Dorman High School in 1969. Someone mentioned Brown versus the Board of Education, 1954, when the court said that schools should be integrated. Well, the word didn't get to us until 1969. And I was in high school. I just started high school, and we were at a Friday night pep rally. You know, in the South, we're big on our pep rallies. And it was a basketball pep rally, so we were inside. We were in the gym. And it was in the afternoon. Hundreds of students in the gym. Most of the black kids on one side, most of the white kids on the other side. It was the 60s in the South. All of a sudden, the door burst open, and this young white student came riding in on a white horse carrying a Confederate flag in the middle of the pep rally. Inside, on the basketball gym floor. Needless to say, I thought it was somewhat awkward. I got up and I walked out. What I did not know is that 400 other students walked out behind me. and I was put out of school for, quote unquote, inciting a protest. I told the principal I wasn't inciting anything, I just felt uncomfortable. But my organizing really didn't take place until after the military at Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina, HBCU. When in 1979, my college roommate and I, Ralph David Abernathy III, the son of Dr. King's confidant, Ralph Abernathy, he and I were roommates, and a young man in Chester, South Carolina, Mickey McClinton, had been found dead, lynched and castrated. Rumor had it that he was dating a young white girl. In Chester, South Carolina, 1979, and we felt that we had to do something. So he and I organized a march from Chester, South Carolina to Columbia, South Carolina to meet with the then governor, Governor Dick Riley, who ended up becoming the Secretary of Education under former President Clinton. Had a very successful march, and that was my introduction to organizing and activism. Now, I want to speak just real briefly about your topic, and then I'm going to sit down. Usually as a Baptist preacher, we have 3 closes. Those of you who know Baptist preachers know that that's true. And so even though I might say as I close, that first one doesn't really count. The words, now is the time. Oh, let me back up. I was told housekeeping, voter registration outside. If you have not registered to vote, please register to vote. If you have moved, you want to register your new address. I'm okay now? Okay. Wanted to make sure I do that. And I thought about this as I was sitting down. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. We're gonna keep on walking, keep on talking. We're marching up the freedom land. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. No justice? No justice? Whose streets? Whose streets? If we don't get it, shut it down. The reality from then to now, the battle cries, the war cries, no justice, no peace. I'm amused. I remember one young lady with Black Lives Matter stood up in front of a group and said, "This ain't my grandmama's movement." They were talking about Black Lives Matter and said, "This ain't my grandmama's movement." And I thought about it for a minute. I said, I can't think of anything that modern day activists and protesters are doing now that we did not do. That the reality of the methodology of organizing, the activities about shutting things down, the boycotts, the protests, we started that. Technology may have enhanced the communication, but at the end of the day, it's still boots on the ground. It's still 10 toes in. I just thought I'd just share that as a part of, not necessarily Dr. King, but we're in Black History Month, so I thought I'd share that. I have a dream. August 28, 1963. And during the March on Washington, as someone mentioned, with everything that Dr. King said in that 12 and a half, 13, 14-minute speech, we remember the excerpts. Now is the time. We as someone said, we do, I have a dream that one day, the Dr. King in the Baptist preacher cadence, I have a dream one day. We get that. We remember that I ain't gonna do it. But that's what we remember, that I have a dream that one day my children, and that we get, but embedded in that speech, we get the now is the time. Where's Danny? Where's Danny? Don't ever put me up behind these young people again, ever again in life. That to make real the promise of democracy, to rise above the dark, desolate valleys of segregation, to the sunlit path of social justice, to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all God's children. And Dr. King said it would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. Dr. King said it would be fatal for the country to overlook the urgency of the right now, of the what is happening right now. Not what is happening in Mississippi or Alabama, but what is happening in St. Louis, Missouri, what is happening in Chicago, what is happening in California, the urgency of the right now, the right now of what is happening to not just black folk, but black and brown and male and female, gay and straight, rich and anyway, I'm a preacher. He cautioned the nation not to overlook the urgency of the moment. Don't overlook what is happening in this country right before you, right before your eyes in real time. And just a little side note, as a student of black history, as a student of the civil rights movement, and leading up to that march, there was a lot of discussion about who would speak, about who wouldn't speak. The women's groups, they wanted a female speaker included. Young people, especially the SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, they demanded a young speaker. Everybody wanted someone to represent them. The women's groups, there was a pushback on them because the organizers, the leaders of the march felt, well, you're represented already. You're represented in labor. You're represented among the faith-based groups. You're represented among the civil rights groups. And so the sisters said, we're going to let y'all have your way on this one, but we will see you again. But the young folks said, no, we want to speak now. We appreciate the fact that y'all have done this and done that, but America needs to see young folk. They need to hear young voices. It's reminiscent of the Obama campaign when this elderly black voter was asked by CNN, ma'am, who you going to vote for? And she just kind of looked around. And the CNN reporter, he must have thought she didn't hear him because he got louder. Ma'am, who you going to vote for? And she just kind of looked around. And the second time before he could say anything, she said, I heard you the first time. She said, I'm waiting to see what the young folk are going to do because they can see farther than me. And so it was important that SNCC, it was important that young folk were heard and seen at the March on Washington. And some of you may recall that former Congressman John Lewis was the person who was invited to speak. When I thought about it, it reminded me of the Francis Howe high school students. The school board that said that we are going to eliminate black history in our curriculum. The school board that said we are going to take black literature out of libraries, and students, black and white, said, no, you won't. Not on our watch, not in our school, because now is our time to stand up, to speak up. And it shouldn't be a coincidence, because the reality of the civil rights movement is that it has always been young folk who have really led and organized and stood 10 toes in. It's been young folk, primarily from community college campuses, HBCUs, state-funded organizations, private colleges from the North and the South who have really been the architects and the vehicle and the creativity and sometimes the cannon fodder for the civil rights movement. It's been y'all. And it wasn't a coincidence that Dr. King used young folk during the civil rights movement in Birmingham. It wasn't a coincidence that they bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church and killed those 4 little girls. It wasn't a coincidence. They bombed that church because that's where young people were being trained in that church. It had nothing to do with the church. It had nothing to do with it being a black church. It was all about this is where young folk are being trained. So it became the point of attack. It's not a coincidence that John Lewis and Diane Lane and the rest of them came out of organizations like Fisk and Morehouse and Hampton and others. That's not a coincidence. So I'm not surprised that the Francis House students decided that they would raise up because this affected me right now. And somebody asked the question, the why. Why the attack on critical race theory? Why the attack on this idea of being woke? Why this attack on a black curriculum and black literature? And then somebody said, well, the rationale, Reverend Gray, might be because white folk don't want young white students to be traumatized. If they realize the history of our country and the fact that our country was born and grew on slavery and hatred and discrimination, and it seems to be woven into the fabric, the DNA of our country, our little white babies would be traumatized. And then I submit to you, but what about little black boys and black girls who for 400 years have been traumatized? And so is it, Tony, that this movement to take black history out of the school, is it more about the fear of traumatizing white students or the fear of young white students reading black history and saying, Lord, granddaddy was something bad. Grandmama was something awful. Maybe you don't want them to know why, because these same white students elected the first black president. Just in case you missed that. When former President Barack Obama was elected, they anticipated that black folk would vote for him. They already knew we were going to vote. Amen. It's okay. Y'all can say amen. Amen just means I agree. It's, you won't fall out your senses or catch the Holy Ghost. It just means I agree. What we did not realize is that 65% of young white first-time voters, 65% of young white first-time voters, 65% elected the first black president. They decided, I'm not going to vote like my folk used to vote. I'm not going to vote based upon your past. I'm going to vote based upon my future. And so 65% of young Danny and them voted. You didn't vote. You weren't old enough. But you know what I'm saying. They voted. But not only did 65% of young white voters go against a history and a heritage, they not only did they go against their ancestors and their culture and their privilege the first time, they did it twice. They put that same guy back in. And so when that happened, and I'm not talking about white men that are here, because I'm assuming that all the white men that are here are good, you all right, you get it. You get it. But white men lost their minds. When their children and grandchildren elected a black president, white men across this country lost their minds. They said, what is happening? Because in their minds, they began to see America, the complexion of America changing, the color of America got darker. It wasn't what they were told. It wasn't the Ozzie and Harriet, Leave It a Beaver. Y'all, I'm sorry, I forgot. I'm talking to a younger group. Dr. Perkins, it wasn't that anymore. And you told me that America was going to be great again. I wonder. Or was it so little black students wouldn't look in the history book and realize that their history did not start in 1611, 1619 in Jamestown, West Virginia, when 26 slaves were brought off of a slave ship, that our history did not begin here, that our history began somewhere else. Maybe you don't want little black students to realize that they, as Jesse would say, really are somebody. Or maybe it's just a combination of all of the above. In 1963, the country had broken faith with the civil rights community, and conditions were not getting any better. Conditions were getting worse. The social and the economic burdens on people of color and poor people demanded that something be done. Dr. King said, the time is always right to do right. And so King called for this community of conscience to come to Washington to rally around the issue of civil rights. 250,000 people, hundreds of buses. The reality is President Kennedy, he didn't even want to meet with the leaders at the beginning. He said, no, when y'all come in, y'all leave. But at the end, when there was no violence, at the end, when 250,000 people came to Washington, D.C., and there was no violence, and there was no destruction, and there were no riots, then Kennedy said, oh, y'all come on over to the White House, and let's sit down and have some coffee and some biscuits. I don't know if they had biscuits. I'm just saying. If it were me, I'd have wanted coffee and biscuits. 250,000 people. King said, now is the time. And when he said, now is the time, as has been said, he was sending out this challenge, not just to America, but he was sending out a challenge to the world. Somebody said that he was saying, well, it's always been time. I would like to say that he was also saying, now is the time again to show up. Now is the time again to speak up. Now is the time again to show up. This idea of the March on Washington didn't originate with King. It originated with A. Philip Randolph in 1941 when he told Eisenhower, we're going to march to D.C. And Eisenhower said, wait a minute, don't march. I'm going to give you what you want. That was in 41. And so A. Philip Randolph realized, but wait a minute, okay, now if we march again, if we threaten to go to D.C. again, maybe, just maybe, we'll get something else. What did we get out of 41? We got the Fair Employment Practices Commission. Okay. What do we need in 1963? We need voting rights. We need civil rights. That's what we need. That's what we're going to call for. But in addition to that, the freedom to vote, the freedom to live where we want to live. We hadn't gotten to the freedom to love who we want to love yet. We hadn't gotten to that. But that freedom and jobs. Okay. So let's make a call, and Dr. King called. That was that challenge. It was as if Dr. King was looking into the hearts and the soul of people everywhere. Because Dr. King understood that this is not just about black folk. You got more poor white folk than you have poor black folk. It's just that poor black folk, the numbers are disproportionate, but there are more poor white folk. Anyway, it wasn't inclusive though. That was one of the failures of the march. It wasn't as inclusive as it could have been or as it should have been. And we've evolved that civil rights is now human rights, and human rights is women's rights, and LGBTQ plus rights, and prisoners' rights, and those challenged with disability or simply those who are different. And so it's changed. Dr. King, through the march, Dr. King, through his words, his action, influenced the federal government to take more of a direct action. And he understood that it had to be the federal government because we even see now state governments. We've got about 30 state governments who are trying to turn back the clock on voting rights for people of color in this country. They're trying to take they're trying to take our country back to the Jim Crow day when we had to beg to vote. When grandmama had to tell the poll worker how many bubbles were in a bar of soap. Do you know how many bubbles are in a bar of soap? You can't answer that question. There's no answer to that question. And so you've got 30 states. You've got states who are initiating laws that are anti-LGBTQ plus, states that are initiating laws that ban reproductive rights and women's rights and voter states that are doing that, who are trying to take us back to the days when America was great. I'm just saying. When one group of people ruled over everybody, including white women, by the way. That wasn't in my speech, but I thought I'd share that. Now even white women have understood through the civil rights movement the power in movement. Amen? Now is the time to make justice a reality, he said, for all God's children. My finallys are shorter than everything else. King was referring to something bigger than one police officer or one prosecutor. It was something more audacious than what usually happens in the courtroom. When you think about the last 10 years since somebody said the death of Mike Brown, the murder of Mike Brown Jr., and I understand that. I understand sometimes, words are important. Mike Brown was killed. When you think that the Ferguson unrest challenged how we look at leadership in this country, it challenged how we organize in this country. Ferguson, St. Louis became the epicenter for this new social justice movement, how we operate, how we and how would you think most modern activists today would hear, receive, internalize, interpret Dr. King's words? The words, "Now is the time." I think that they would have heard within Dr. King's words his emphasizing the importance of the present, that they would hear and heed as they did in Ferguson for 380 some days, as they did when George Floyd was killed right before our eyes, as they did when Breonna Taylor was killed in her house, in her bed, as they did as Colorado, whoever they were, Eric Gardner and Sandra Bland, as young people responded. I like to think that they heard the words of Dr. King. Now is the time. This warning that by assuming that racial justice will happen eventually, young folks said, "Oh no, not on my watch." And so young folk went to the street. And they protested, they organized, they communicated with each other, they utilized social media, and because they did it, they forced mom and daddy to pay attention. They forced grandmom and granddaddy to pay attention because somebody said, "Why is my child so involved? Why is my child so active?" And not all the protests in this country, though, has been nonviolent. We understand that. The January 6th riot, that was protest. Come on now. Charlottesville, that was protest. This reality that because in the midst of this movement, this Black Lives Matter movement and this Ferguson movement, in the midst of that came white Christian nationalism. For every action, there's a reaction. King signaled in his words the importance of being vigilant, but also paying attention to systems and paying attention to context. and somebody mentioned the educational system. The reality is when we talk about it, that school systems, the revenue that they get is from property tax. And so when you talk about Clayton and you talk about property tax in Clayton versus property tax in Ferguson or North End St. Louis, there's no property tax in North End St. Louis. There's no home ownership I mean, there's a little, but there's no push for home ownership. Therefore, how are you going to get property tax if you don't have home ownership, if you don't have businesses? Where are you going to get the property tax from? And so there's a reason that there's no home ownership in the black community. There's a reason why there's no push for black businesses in the community. I'm almost finished. That was my second close. I don't know about you, but I'm keeping up with these closes. The reality, you know, okay, I know, but I want to respect where I'm at but I want to be true to who Dr. King was. You know, Dr. King talked about Vietnam. As today we talk about what is happening in the Middle East, Dr. King felt that that was important, that our country has a responsibility. And so Dr. King talked about that. But there are those who are saying, listen, how do we challenge our friends to do what's right? How do we do that? How do we challenge our friends overseas to do what's right? A ceasefire is the right thing to do, but releasing hostages is also the right thing to do. Being able to protect your country is the right thing to do, but oppression is real too. But anyway, I hadn't written that down anywhere, but if I'm thinking about Dr. King and somebody mentioned Vietnam, you can't just put Dr. King in a box. You can't just extract this part of Dr. King and not take the rest of Dr. King. My third and final close. To me, the words "now is a time" reflects an immediate need to be reminded that the destiny of black and white and brown and yellow and red and male and female and gay and straight are bound together. Urgency for Dr. King was for people to understand justice as a system with its elements linked together. The police, the prosecutor, the courtroom, the prison system, that all of it is linked together. We talk about just recently the reality of slavery within the prison industrial complex. We're talking about allegations in Alabama and Mississippi where state prisoners are being forced to work for these big Fortune 500 companies for slave wages. Everything has changed, but nothing has changed. Now is the time to demand justice now. Now is the time to demand positive results in the education of our children now. And Dr. King warned us that the failure to heed the fierce urgency of now may render our aspirations for peace, will cause us to join what he had called this bleached, boned, and jumbled residue of numerous civilizations, where it is written in the pathetic words "too late," that if we wait too long, it'll be too late. It'll be too late for all those 5 gifted, aspiring young folk if we wait too long. But some of us have gotten complacent. You know, some of us have gotten comfortable. You know, the civil rights movement produced a whole lot. Our connection with labor, black became part of the middle class, even if it was lower middle class. We became part of the middle class. We moved out into the suburbs. We got 2 cars. You know what I'm talking about. You know, we did that, and we got comfortable. And we left the inner city all by itself. We left the inner city with the community violence. We left the inner city with no way to care for itself. Our churches were still downtown, but our house was somewhere else. And so we left that. We gave up. We failed. Because we said, now is the time for me to get up out of here. And we forgot, now is the time for me to care for the least of these. We forgot that now is the time for me to care for the vulnerable. And we forgot that part. We forgot the part that after they come after me today and they through with me, they're going to come after you tomorrow. We forgot that part. Dr. King said, now is the time. And so we circle back around. And Dr. King was killed because he realized that this movement that he gave his life to, it wasn't black. It wasn't a black movement. It was a human movement. And Dr. King realized that he had to expand. He had to enlarge his territory, as we say in the church. He had to expand his tent. And Dr. King said, we can no longer just talk about black folk being able to sit on the customer side of the cash register. We've got to, Dr. King's focus turned to economic injustice. And so that conversation about Vietnam was moved up to, you know, at Riverside Church when he talked about this thing about bombs versus bread. That in a country as wealthy as ours, we can manufacture bombs to kill, to destroy lives, but we can't bake bread to sustain lives. He talked about being the richest country in the world, the state of poverty that so many folk are living in, and that poverty that determines the life you live in so many cases, whether or not you choose a life of crime or... And Dr. King said, we're going back to Washington. Dr. King said, we're going to do a poor people's march. We did a civil rights march now because everybody's affected by this. Because this can't be about black only. It's got to be more than that. Dr. King said, now is the time for us to look beyond ourselves. And when you do that, you realize that we have more in common than we have different. That I don't know of many black parents that don't want the same thing as white parents want. We want a quality education for our child. We want our children to be safe. We want our children to be healthy. When our children get sick, we want them to get good medical care. So Dr. King said we've got to expand this. That when I talk about this dream about my children and your children, I want you to understand that my dream is not unlike your dream. It's the same dream. And so he said, let's come back to Washington. And because they realized the power that building alliances have, that the power of this community of conscience, this power of unity, when they understood that Dr. King was able to bring together various communities, people that may not have agreed with everything that Dr. King agreed with, but there was a commonality in this whole idea of economic justice and injustice. Because it was the foundation of so many of our ills and so many of our problems. And when they realized that he could bring back 1 million people, they killed him. When we talk about this fight, there's haves and have-nots and wealth and generational wealth and wealth gap and wealth disparity, it is real. And Dr. King understood that. And so I would imagine that if Dr. King were still alive today, that would be his focus. His focus would be on economic injustice. His focus would be on making sure that we had the resources that we need in our communities so that we would not have to go beg and cap in hand to others to feed our children, to house our children, to educate our children. And so I thank you for the time that you've given me tonight. I don't know if that was helpful or not. Like I said, the 5 that came before me, they actually did all the work. All I did was came in here and just shared with you what they had already shared. But I thank you again, Dr. Perkins, for the opportunity. I thank you, Dr. Haynes, for sharing in this collaborative. And I'm encouraged by y'all. I see y'all. I'm encouraged by y'all. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Wow. Thank you for your inspiring words, Reverend Gray. They were truly moving. We all owe you a debt of gratitude for your commitment to our local community and to our nation. Before we end this evening's celebration, I would like to thank Erin Minion, the chair of our celebration committee. This is Dr. Minion's second year as the chair, and she has done an exceptional job leading the committee in this important work. Please join me in a round of applause for Dr. Minion. I would also like to thank our celebration committee members, past Chair Amy Brown Marshall, Ramika Thomas, Angie Wagner, DeAndre Braxted, Shantana Stewart, Stephanie Grice, Mike Machulas, Elizabeth Perkins, Barbara Thompson, LaRonda Wilson, Aaron Linder, Lynn Selders, and Brian T. Williamson. Thank you also to our college marketing and communication staff for all of your incredible work and support in promoting this event. I would also like to thank Brian Perkins for his work in creating the video shared in this evening's event, and also to the additional support he provided to this event. STLCC will continue to honor American heroes and reflect on the progress yet to be made. We are just beginning to celebrate Black History Month, and we will also celebrate Women's History Month in March. We also hope that you will join us for our theater and musical performances, art gallery shows, and all of our other wonderful events that our campus offers free to the public. For a full list of our events, please visit stlcc.edu. Thank you all for joining us, and please be safe on your way home.